Welcome to the deep dive. We take the crucial ideas from a whole stack of sources so you don't have to. Think of it as your shortcut to getting up to speed.
hmm
Today we're diving into Abundance, the book by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson.
And just a quick note, this deep dive is brought to you by Ben's Book Summaries.
Right. So our goal today basically is to pull out the main arguments, those really surprising insights, the quotes people remember, and, why this book matters right now.
Yeah.
At its core, abundance pushes this really powerful idea that a lot of the shortages we see in America, housing, energy, you name it, they aren't inevitable. They're choices.
Choices we've made, yeah.
Hmm.
And Klein and Thompson argue that the way forward, the path to a better future, is actually building and inventing more of the things we need.
We're definitely going to unpack that.
And it's a broad look, isn't it? They cover housing, sure,
Yeah.
but also energy, healthcare, our infrastructure, and even, like, the engine of it all, innovation itself.
Okay, let's jump in. The book opens with this really striking vision of the future. Imagine waking up, clean energy everywhere, cheap solar panels on your roof.
Right, feeding into a grid that's drawing power from wind, nuclear, geothermal. A total contrast to, say, our parents' generation relying so heavily on fossil fuels.
It's a stark difference, absolutely. A deliberate one, I think.
Oh, definitely deliberate. It grabs you immediately. They paint this picture of clean, cheap energy not as some sci-fi dream, but as something actually within reach. It sets the whole tone.
Sets the stage for their main point. Big progress is possible, maybe more possible than we tend to think.
And it's not just energy, is it? They talk about, like, vertical farms.
Yeah. Local produce grown in these huge multi-story greenhouses, freeing up tons of land.
And even cultivated meat, grown in labs, which drastically cuts the environmental footprint of traditional farming.
It's a world where meeting basic needs doesn't have to wreck the planet.
Exactly. That opening vision, it's the before and after. Before is now, right?
Right.
Climate change, resource constraints.
Yeah.
The after is this future of abundance. But it's not magic. It comes from deciding to build, to innovate. Makes you really think, what could we achieve?
Which brings us neatly to maybe the most famous line from the book. It's actually the dedication. Scarcity is a choice.
Mm-hmm. 3 words. Sums it all up.
Yeah.
Mm.
Klein and Thompson basically argue that our biggest hurdles, clean energy transition, affordable housing in cities, these aren't fundamental limits. They're often the result of policies, of political roadblocks we've put in our own way.
Which makes you ask, well, if it's a choice, why does scarcity feel so real, so pervasive?
Right.
And the book digs into that, how our goals, our aspirations haven't always lined up with, the political will to make them happen. It really pushes you to question those scarcity narratives.
And a classic example they use is how we've tackled housing and healthcare historically. For ages, the main strategy, particularly on the progressive side, was subsidizing demand. Housing vouchers, healthcare subsidies.
And they're not saying those things are inherently bad.
No, not at all.
But the core argument is, if you only focus on subsidizing demand and you don't aggressively fix the supply problem, not enough houses, not enough doctors, whatever it is, then you just end up chasing your tail. More money chasing the same limited supply just means prices go up.
Exactly. It's like trying to solve a traffic jam by giving everyone gas money doesn't build more roads.
Right. For housing, it leads straight to the affordability crisis. For healthcare, subsidies without controlling costs or increasing providers means higher premiums, longer waits.
They use that great analogy, giving someone a taller ladder to reach an elevator that just keeps going higher and higher.
Yeah, that's a good one. And the numbers they show are pretty stark, aren't they?
They really are. Like 1950, median home price was about twice the average annual income
Okay.
by 2020. 6 times.
Wow. Big jump.
Huge. And health insurance premiums tripled, more than tripled, between 99 and 2023. And workers are paying a bigger chunk of that.
Same story for college tuition, childcare. It paints this picture of things getting less and less affordable, even though we're spending tons of money trying to help people afford them.
It's a decades-long crisis. But they do see maybe a shift happening recently, a move towards thinking about the supply side.
Yeah, that's an interesting point they make. Some recent policies, maybe even with bipartisan hints, seem to acknowledge this. Like the Inflation Reduction Act, climate and healthcare, but also big incentives for producing clean energy.
Right. And the CHIP EDS Act, directly trying to boost semiconductor manufacturing here.
It suggests maybe a growing awareness that you can't just focus on demand, you have to build the supply too.
Now, to dig into the complexities, they spend a fair bit of time on California. It's sort of the paradox state, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very progressive, but facing huge housing costs, homelessness.
And that high-speed rail saga.
Yeah,
Yeah, endless high-speed rail.
California is like the go-to case study. Conservatives love pointing to it as, see, liberal policies don't work.
And the authors don't really shy away from the problems. Highest homelessness rates, worst housing affordability, people actually leaving the state because it's so expensive. It forces you to ask, okay, what's really going on?
And they argue that some of what went wrong there has lessons for everyone, like when government, even with good intentions, just can't seem to deliver results.
It breeds frustration, opens the door for populist movement saying, see, the system's broken.
Yeah. Which ties into their idea about a shifting political order. The old way, the sort of neoliberal consensus, they say it's weakening.
And that creates an opening, maybe, for something new. And they propose abundance, having enough of what we need for a good life as a potential core idea for whatever comes next. It's a fundamental question, really.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Cities. They argue cities are more vital than ever, even with remote work and all that.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive, right? Technology shrinks distance, so why are cities more important?
What's their take?
Their argument is that the returns to innovation, the benefits you get from new ideas, are increasingly concentrated in cities. As transport and communication got better, markets got global. And that makes the dense clusters of talent, specialized knowledge, and just like practical know-how you find in cities even more valuable, harder to copy somewhere else.
Makes sense. You still have Wall Street for finance, Silicon Valley for tech.
Exactly. They're ecosystems. People, knowledge, years of practice all mashed together. It's tough to replicate. Even the CEO of Zoom apparently said, you need people in the office sometimes to build trust, innovate quickly.
Interesting. But that brings us to a major roadblock they identify, the whole anti-growth thing, restrictive zoning.
Oh, yeah. Huge factor. They trace how zoning started as, basic land management.
Right. Sensible enough.
But evolved into this powerful weapon to just stop new housing, especially affordable housing.
They use that great contrast. Lakewood, California, after World War II, boom, thousands of affordable homes built fast.
Yeah, assembly line style almost.
Then you compare that to Petaluma later, putting the brakes on. And over time, things like bigger minimum lot sizes, mandatory parking spots everywhere.
All these rules just pile up, effectively capping housing supply, driving up costs.
And the link they draw to homelessness is really striking. They argue that getting rid of things like boarding houses, which used to be a major source of cheap rooms, was a direct result of these anti-growth policies. That St. Louis Post-Dispatch quote from the 50s, worrying about rooming houses degrading neighborhoods.
Wow. It really shows the mindset shift.
Yeah, and the unintended consequences. Protecting property values, maybe, but also eliminating affordable options and pushing people onto the streets.
And as they point out, housing scarcity directly benefits existing homeowners, right? Their property values go up.
Definitely an incentive baked in there. And this resistance to growth, it's not just housing. They look at the environmental movement, too.
Right, that paradox. Started with concerns about pollution, loss of nature, Rachel Carson, Silent Spring, Earth Day. And Nixon, surprisingly, had a strong environmental record back then. EPA, Clean Air Act, broad support.
But then more recently, you get this degrowth idea emerging in some circles.
Yeah, and they're careful to distinguish. Degrowth isn't just about climate change for its proponents. It's often a broader critique of materialism, of economic expansion itself.
Whereas Klein and Thompson are pushing an abundance agenda.
Exactly, which tries to square environmental protection with progress, with a better quality of life, mainly through technology, cleaner energy. It's a different path forward.
Okay, so let's talk energy. They're pretty optimistic here, aren't they?
They are, yeah. They highlight the plummeting cost of solar. It's incredible. Plus the potential of wind, nuclear, geothermal, maybe even fusion down the road.
They even mention negative energy prices, like getting paid to use electricity sometimes.
Yeah. When there's just so much renewable power flooding the grid, it shows how much things are changing.
The stat about more solar installed in 2023 than in, like, the previous 60 years combined, that's wild.
It really shows the acceleration. And comparing different developed countries, the U.S. versus France or the U.K., shows you can have a high standard of living with much lower emissions. It's about where the power comes from.
But, okay, the challenge. Switching everything over, upgrading the grid, it's huge. That Jesse Jenkins estimate?
Oh, yeah, needing to basically rebuild our entire grid's worth of supply every 15 years until 2050.
Staggering, gives you a sense of the scale.
It really does. The land needed for solar and wind, the transmission lines, those environmental law professors, Rule and Salzman, calculated we need like 2 new large solar plants every week for 30 years.
Wow, okay. Puts it in perspective.
Definitely.
And speaking of big builds, California high-speed rail, the cautionary tale.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Voters approved it in '08, right?
Yeah.
$33 billion done by 2020.
And now it's in, what did they call it? Strange limbo.
Yeah, that captures it. Delays, costs ballooning, the main LA to SF line, basically unfunded, unclear if it'll ever get finished as planned.
A perfect example of how hard it is to build big things in the U.S. now.
And related to that, construction productivity. This was surprising to me. Manufacturing gets more efficient, but construction kind of flatlined.
Yeah, why is that? They point to land use rules again and how the industry is mostly small firms?
Right. Unlike a car company that can build a huge factory and sell everywhere, home builders are often stuck dealing with local rules, city by city. Hard to scale up, hard to innovate efficiently.
It wasn't always like that, apparently.
What's
Back
it?
between the 30s and 70s, housing output per worker improved similarly to auto manufacturing.
Interesting. So it's a more recent divergence.
Seems so. Another big theme they hit is adversarial legalism.
The idea that the explosion of regulations plus the ability for anyone to sue the government gums up the works.
Even if the intent is good accountability, protecting rights, the result is often just delay. Endless delay.
That 2017 Regulatory Accountability Act they mentioned, even though it failed, it showed the trend. Just layers and layers of process comments, cross-examinations.
Nicholas Bagley's phrase, the procedure fetish. Focusing so much on following the rules that you forget the actual goal.
Yeah, getting things done for people.
And this procedural maze seems to coincide with public trust in government just cratering since the 60s.
Right. They don't say it's the only cause,
Yeah.
but if the government seems bogged down in process and isn't delivering results,
It doesn't exactly inspire confidence.
Bagley's point is good. Legitimacy isn't just about following rules. It's also about seeming capable, responsive, fair, getting things done promptly.
The high-speed rail example, again, following all the procedures, but still no train between the main cities? Process doesn't equal outcome.
So where does progress actually come from? They argue for an invention agenda.
Venus.
Well, they note that in some fields, even with more money pumped in, big breakthroughs seem slower, possibly because of the burden of knowledge.
The idea that the easy stuff's been discovered and now problems are way more complex.
Exactly. Requires bigger teams, more specialization, according to Benjamin Jones's theory.
But they also question how we organize science, like the NIH grant process.
Yeah, they suggest it might favor safer, more incremental research over the really high-risk, high-reward stuff.
Yeah.
Because, it's easier to get funded.
Cattle and Kiriko's struggle with mRNA funding is the prime example, right? Took decades.
Decades. And look how crucial that turned out to be.
They contrast NIH with models like DARPA or the old Bell Labs.
Right. More mission-focused, bringing diverse people together, giving them freedom for ambitious projects. That quote about the silicon transistor focusing on manufacturability right from the start at Bell Labs.
Shows that link between basic research and practical application.
Crucially, though, invention isn't enough. Implementation matters just as much.
The penicillin story, great example. Fleming discovers it, but
It took a massive U.S. government effort during WWII to actually figure out how to mass produce it and get it to soldiers.
right. It wasn't just a single eureka moment. It was iterative work, building infrastructure.
Challenges that whole myth. And that John Arnold quote is spot on. America can invent, China can build. The first country that can do both.
Will be the superpower. Yeah, hits hard.
Which makes Operation Warp Speed such an interesting case study.
Rapid vaccine development and deployment, a huge success, really.
Massive success, saved lives, helped the economy, but weirdly, it hasn't had strong political champions. And some people spin it as an argument against government action.
Strange. It seems like a prime example of what focused government effort can achieve.
Which brings us back to the politics. Abundance versus scarcity.
Their argument is the old political order is fading, creating space for a new politics focused on building more.
Instead of a politics of scarcity, which often just leads to division, blaming immigrants for housing shortages, things like that.
They see signs of this potential shift, maybe, the YMBY movement demanding more housing.
Yeah, yes. In my backyard. And the Biden administration's focus on infrastructure, clean energy, could be early signs.
To wrap up their vision, they kind of evoke the 1964 New York World's Fair.
Right. That super optimistic view of the future, that belief in progress and abundance that America used to have. a reminder of that spirit.
A spirit they hope we can recapture.
Okay, just a final reminder. This deep dive has been brought to you by Ben's Book Summaries.
So, wrapping up our look at abundance, the central message really sticks, doesn't it? These challenges we face, they often stem from scarcities we've chosen.
Yeah, through policy, through inaction sometimes.
Yeah.
And the path forward they propose is clear. Focus on building, on innovating, on creating more of what we need.
It's a fundamentally optimistic message, I think, despite the critiques.
It is. And maybe a final thought for listeners. Abundance and scarcity, they're powerful stories we tell ourselves, aren't they?
Narratives.
Which story we choose to believe, which one we act on, that really shapes our future, our character as a nation. Maybe think about the examples we talked about, where in your own world could shifting from scarcity thinking to an abundance mindset make a real difference.
Something to chew on. This deep dive has been brought to you by Ben's Book Summaries. If you found this useful and want more quick insights into important books, definitely check out their other summaries and resources.